Dumelang Betsu. I don't know where to start, but I think a good place to start is maybe do an illustration. Let's rename this chair crisis. And say that in my life and what I'm going to share with you, I'm going to demonstrate that you are either walking into the crisis, inside the crisis, or getting out of the crisis. But very soon you get into another one. And for purposes of placement, let me just give you a few years in terms of pivotal periods in my life. I'm going to date myself a little bit. 87 is when I graduated as a lawyer. I worked from there for a law firm called Minchin & Kelly for 4 years. And during that 4 years, I went and did a master's degree. And then I came back and worked for another year for Minchin & Kelly. And then from there, I opened my own law firm in partnership with Sohopolo. Sohopolo is now a judge of the High Court of Botswana. And the crisis I'm going to share with you is around 1995 when it took place. And by the way, when it comes to crisis, there's almost like a whole shelf in my house. I had to pick which one I want to share for you because I don't think sometimes in life you can avoid crisis. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we get tripped by crises that emerge from our personal lives in as much as we get tripped by crises that occur from our professional lives. And given the fact that I'm a practicing Seventh-day Adventist, and Moshe has asked me to come and speak on the Sabbath, I always make it a point that I share some relevant scripture. That way, I tell myself that I'm not entirely violating the fourth commandment in the sense that I'm sharing the word. But the scripture that I thought I could share quickly with you is Proverbs 24:16. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again, but the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. Another version says, the godly may trip 7 times, but they will get up. But one disaster is enough to overthrow the wicked. This scripture has given me fuel, like the previous speaker spoke, which reminds me every time I'm in a crisis, that if I remain in this crisis, and if I let this crisis defeat me, then I'm wicked. Because the scripture says that the wicked fall to their destruction during a crisis. It started off on a Sunday morning. It was a phone call from my mother. By that time, my parents had both retired to Kanye. I know it's hard for you millennials to believe, but it was a physical phone in my house. And I had to get out and answer the phone, and it was my mother. And she said, come over to Kanye to collect your grandmother. My grandmother's name is Mutsidisi Mogobe. She was 94 years old at the time, and she was not feeling well. And as it happens, around 95, I had bought a brand new C-Class Mercedes-Benz. That thing could cruise. And given the black tech situation in which we all are, the general consensus, they had a meeting in my absence, but the general consensus was only one car is suitable to take this unwell grandmother to the hospital in Gaborone because she had been seeing a doctor here in Gabs. And it was decided in my absence, and I was voted, I guess, 5-0 because I wasn't even there. Both my parents and my sister and my cousins decided. So, come and get your grandmother. She's unwell. Come. Grandmama, I don't feel like it. I had this weird feeling. And if you want more juicy details, please get my book. It's coming out this month. It's called Momp, Nuggets of Grit. And I go into greater detail. But let me just summarize the story for you because my time is limited. So, should I go? No, I don't want to go. But I'm a big guy. I can make my own decisions. You know, at that time, I was staying with my girlfriend who was 7.5 months pregnant with my first son. And I was king of my castle. You know what I mean? And those days driving a C-class Mercedes-Benz was nothing to sniff at. As a super successful lawyer that I was, I had the walk even, I had that thing that I'm doing well. But little did I know what was about to unfold. So I said, Mama, please, come on, Mama, please. I called her Mama. May God rest her soul now. And eventually my sister came on the line. Look, you know how important this is to your parents. Come. I ignored her. She called again an hour later. Eventually, I got into the car. Tell my now wife, then girlfriend, look, I have to go. What choice do I have? So I drive to Kanye. As you know, Kanye is 92 kilometers away. We get there. They are ready. They are waiting for me. They put the old lady at the back, and I put, seat belt and everything. And, a cousin of mine called Kagiso comes along in the front seat. So we're driving back now. We're driving back. We go past Moshopa, and there's a bit of a drizzle. And as I drive, I see a vehicle ahead of me, and I see that it's moving. At least I convinced myself that it's moving. So I accelerate a little bit. These are the kind of cars that you want to, it's almost like a range, those days, comparatively speaking, My wife drives a range. That's how come I know God has been kind to us now. But anyway, so I'm approaching this vehicle. I can see that it's there, it's moving. But as I get closer, I come to the sudden realization that it's not moving. I look to the left, there's a big ditch this side, and I imagine the car rolling. Remember, this has to be a decision I had to make within a split second. I look this side, there's actually literally a Land Cruiser, 4x4, coming this way at high speed. And I weigh my options. Ditch, vehicle, now I realize, it's stationary! I realize that it's stationary. I have to decide. And then this side, there's that other vehicle coming. So I take a split-second decision. Shoo! I better just brake onto this one. Shoo! With all the force that I could muster. Bah! I should mention that prior to this accident, my grandmother sitting at the back said, I'm not feeling well. This seat belt. Let me take it off so I can lie down. And then I am actually the one who took it off and had her lie down there. My grandmother, I love her so much. This is a person who was telling me Dinane. This is a person who used to stay with me when my parents were away. This is a person who gave me all the love they could imagine. In fact, she was the center of attraction for all us, Ditloholo, and we loved her so much. So I didn't think twice when she said, can I take off my seatbelt? And she lies down. Yeah. Before I knew it, my grandmother had been thrust forward over Kagiso, and she had smashed there. And then when I woke up or came to realize, she had broken both her legs. And then I take off my seatbelt, I get out, and I see nothing but blood, literally a fountain of blood. And then I look at the mirror, I don't have a nose, just dangles or bits of flesh lying around, and I can't make sense out of it. And what's going on? My grandmother there, and they touch, it happened so fast. And all of a sudden, I think the parents came from Kanye. It was determined that she died on the spot. And then with 2 broken legs there, and then me, fountain of blood. The more I cover the nose as it's bleeding, the more I realize that it's a exercise in futility. Then I'm rushed off to the clinic there in Moshopa. They do a little bit of pet job. Basically, they just put a lot of, and my nose was this big, like I had two heads, if you know what I mean, just to absorb that blood. And then I'm rushed to the Adventist hospital, and there I met a doctor. I think that guy was Malawian, eh? I don't remember him sedating me, but what I remember him is like Kali. I saw him like Aroka, literally. I could see as he was cementing the nose, or what remained of it. And, you know, I remember bits and pieces of that. Let's see how the time I'm doing. I remember bits of pieces of that, including my brother-in-law, who's a white guy, coming in and driving in and to make fun of me, saying, now I'm going to call you Rango, you know. I see these white guys. But anyway, that was an error of judgment. Why was it an error of judgment? I obviously overrode that gut feel that I had, you know, and normally there's a gut feel that it's not the day for it. These days I've come to master it somewhat. And as entrepreneurs, you need to go with that gut, you know, because it's almost like when something terrible is going to happen, it's foretold in some way. Number two, I obviously underestimated the distance. I mean, I ought to have been careful. I ought not to have been carried away with the fact that it's a fancy vehicle, you know, ABS and everything that is going to, you know. And then what made things worse, and I may have forgotten to mention, is that there was a slight drizzle. So in as much as I was braking, the vehicle was sliding under. Now, I've lost my grandmother, and you know that feeling that you're a murderer. You know, I don't know, I've murdered my own grandmother, someone I loved. And on top of that, I've deprived my sibling and my cousins of such a center of love. Somebody around whom we fashioned our ideas, somebody around whom because you know, we're a bit traditional out there. I happen to be a headman also in the Kota, because I inherited the position from my dad. So my dad's position as a headman of the Kota, and the importance of my grandmother as a matriarch, and being responsible for taking out a matriarch, that thing really, really gutted me for the longest time. And that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was when I received a subpoena and a summons from the Attorney General's chambers. Huh? State versus Rre Mogobe. What are the facts or the allegations? It is alleged on or about the 5th of May 1995, you drove a vehicle in such a manner that you did not exercise reasonable care and attention, and this led to the death of your grandmother. And it's a court case now, you know. And as much as everybody in the family, it's an accident, everybody knows it's an accident. Everybody knows that this was, but they dragged me to court. The case was opened at the magistrate's court. I went to a lawyer known as Chula Dahanayake. Chula Dahanayake was a Sri Lankan national, and thank God for Chula, because Chula then wrote there's a thing called in law, raising points in limine, or technical points, where he raised about 19 technical points. I wasn't thinking straight. And then he filed those documents and served them on the Attorney General. And by God's grace, when they were faced with those preliminary technical points, they then withdrew this monstrous event, or this monstrous lawsuit. What also happened around then, and this is right on the positive, is a realization that our traditional medicinal and pharmacological systems are very, very efficient. Why am I saying this? As a result of this accident, I had broken 3 ribs here. My nose was gone. I had twisted an ankle. Actually, I had broken an ankle, and I was walking on crutches. So my dad, who was a traditionalist, he was a modern guy, but he was also a traditionalist, said, no. I have an answer for this. Go and see so and so. Go morake ngobo kete. That's me, not believing. But Got those crutches. I'm trying to imitate somebody on crutches. But at least I learned one thing, you listen to your parents. So the old man sees me and he's whistling. It's like no care in the world. And then he's just looking, just like hell. He just goes and draws a few lines on the ground and then points here, points there, and points there. And then instantly, pa! There and there, 3 ribs fixed. This fixed. Tobeha. Bagaetsu. I was healed instantly. Ka tobeha. The very tobeha ibidu ang witchcraft. And there's a little joke on this. I once invited to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom a certain Dr. Tsonope. Dr. Tsonope researches these things. And he's written about them, and he calls it traditional pharmacology. And he says tobeha is actually science. And it's just that nobody is bothering to investigate it or to document it properly. But it works. And I don't know, anybody here experienced tobeha or had somebody close to them have tobeha experience? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm not a liar, eh? I think I deserve a round of applause because some skeptics here were a bit skeptical about it. So the point is that, look, I went through this crisis and I went out of it. There have been several other crises, but for me, in terms of getting ready for another cataclysm or cataclysmic event, this really helped me because it's almost like it's a pattern. If you look at the book of Genesis, 7 years of drought, followed by 7 years of plenty. I've worked it out that it's really on sort of time frames of 5 to 7 years. Even if you look at things like the crises and so on, the financial crisis, you see that it takes more or less these patterns of 7 years or so. So when in fact another major crisis came in 2001, and this one was life-threatening because I was facing the threat of losing my career as a lawyer, where I had a tussle with the Law Society, which I thought was unreasonable and unfair. But that one lasted for 2.5 years, and we were eventually triumphant. But it's almost like it's true. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you, if you accept that it's the nature of the beast, as an entrepreneur, as a human being, you go from one crisis to another.